I've been an agent for a long time, a government agent no less. When you've been in the field as long as I have, you get used to strange assignments. I've had my fair share of odd, unsettling jobs, nothing quite like the ones that come from the higher-ups. I started out like most recruits, fresh-faced, eager to prove myself. But after a few years, that eagerness fades. You see a lot of things you wish you hadn't, things you can't unsee. You get hardened to it, and you start taking orders without asking too many questions. At least that's how it was for me. The job had always been about following orders, staying silent, and keeping your head down. No one in the agency talked about what they were really working on. Sure, there were whispers. Agents who came back from assignments, their eyes wide and haunted. But you didn't ask about those kinds of things. You kept moving, kept doing the job. But something about the job I was about to take felt different. They never told me the details, never told me what the mission was really about. They just gave me a set of coordinates and a simple instruction. Go to the tunnel, wait, just wait. I'm used to being in the dark, but this felt like something else entirely. I didn't think too much about it at the time. Not then. I was more focused on the task ahead, as usual. But now, looking back, it was clear I should have been more cautious. I drove out there late at night, the road winding through desolate stretches of land. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty landscape. It was just me, the road, and the thickening fog in the distance. I had been driving for hours when I finally saw it up ahead, the tunnel. A long, dark stretch of concrete, half hidden in mist. I slowed as I neared the entrance, the sound of my tires hissing on the damp road. There was nothing in sight, not even a sign of life. No other cars, no people. Just the eerie silence that seemed to follow me wherever I went. I pulled over about 100 meters from the entrance, as instructed. It wasn't much of a wait at first, just the quiet buzz of my infotainment system flickering to life. The screen blinked once, then a message popped up, a header in stark black text. This is not a test. I stared at the words for a moment, wondering what they meant. And then the rules appeared, each one outlined in clear, concise language. It all felt so strange, like it was meant to be followed to the letter. I read the rules carefully. Rule 1. Once the fog appears in the tunnel, you cannot turn back. Agents who have attempted this often end their recordings with sudden, blood-curdling screams, followed by an unsettling silence. Even if you spot a figure in the distance, you must continue forward. I blinked, rereading the sentence. Felt odd, out of place. What kind of rule was that? What kind of situation were they preparing me for? Rule 2. As you approach the tunnel, a figure will appear in the middle of the road, cloaked in mist. Stop your vehicle immediately and wait for it to approach your door. I rubbed my eyes. This was getting more bizarre by the second. What figure? Why was I being told all of this? And why now? Rule 3. When the figure draws near, do not open the window or door. Instead, calmly state that you wish to proceed with your mission. My brow furrowed. Who wrote this? Who could possibly follow these rules without questioning everything? Rule 4. If the figure laughs and retreats, you will encounter it again inside the tunnel. Do not show fear, it can sense it. Maintain a neutral demeanor and act as if nothing is amiss. I let out a slow breath, trying to calm my racing mind. This wasn't a normal mission. Rule 5. If the figure retreats without making a sound, you are fortunate. It will not return. Rule 6. If the figure knocks on your window, remain calm. Your chances of survival have diminished. Continue driving, but do not attempt to resist. Lethal force will have no effect on it. Rule 7. Once the figure is no longer visible, reduce your speed to no more than 20 kilometers per hour. Those who have broken this rule have found their vehicles torn to shreds, with no sign of the agents ever being recovered. We believe the figure is responsible. I kept reading, but by this point, what was going on? Was this some sort of psychological test? A game? Rule 8. As you enter the tunnel, you may see a shadow in your rearview mirror, seated in the back. Do not panic. Do not look directly at it. Simply ask, "How's the weather?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something there already. But it was empty. The car was still and quiet. Rule 9. If it replies that it's raining, you are not in immediate danger. Rule 10. If it replies that it's sunny, you are at risk of losing your sanity. Rule 11. When you meet the figure again, stop your vehicle as it approaches. This time, it will want to engage in a game. Lower your window fully. Nothing will happen for now. Reach for your gun, but do not attempt to unload it. If you do, it will grow angry. Hand the gun to the figure. It will point it at you, and you must remain still. One of two things will happen. It may fire, but nothing will emerge from the barrel. If you are shot, we will send your family your uniform, provided you are found. I stopped reading for a second, my mind racing. A game? I was supposed to play some game with this figure? Rule 12. If you survive, accelerate as fast as possible toward the tunnel's exit. The vehicle must reach its maximum speed. If you are too far from the exit or fail to go fast enough, you will not make it. Should you reach the end, congratulations. You have survived. Survived? It was all starting to feel like some twisted version of an initiation, a test I hadn't asked for. And yet, here I was, about to drive into the very heart of it. I leaned back in the seat, my fingers hovering over the steering wheel. There was a long pause. The screen flickered again, and then it went dark, as if it had no more to say. I stared at the empty display, feeling a heavy weight settle in my chest. The fog at the entrance of the tunnel was growing thicker, now creeping out onto the road like a living thing. I heard a sound, a noise as if something was moving. I glanced around, but there was nothing, just the tunnel stretching ahead like an endless mouth. The fog was rolling in, more dense now, and I could barely see 10 feet in front of the car. I took a deep breath and put the car in gear. It was time to move forward. As I crept closer to the tunnel, the fog started swirling around the headlights, making everything feel distant and dreamlike. The road seemed to narrow, as if it was trying to swallow me whole. I adjusted my grip on the wheel as I focused on the path ahead. Every few seconds, my gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, checking for anything out of place, but the rear of the car remained empty. The road ahead seemed to pulse with a strange energy, like it was alive. Then, just as I was about to enter the tunnel, I saw it, the figure I was warned about, slowly materializing in the middle of the road, surrounded by the thick fog. It was tall, its form difficult to make out, but the faint outline of a figure, hooded, moving with a deliberate pace, was terrifying. I immediately remembered the first rule. I slammed my foot onto the brake, bringing the car to a halt. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I stared ahead, watching as the figure in the mist continued to approach. I didn't move. I simply sat there, staring at the figure, waiting for it to come closer. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror once again, checking if anything else was in the shadows, but there was nothing there, just the same oppressive fog. The figure came closer, closer still, and then it stopped right by my door. I could hear it breathing slow, measured breaths that broke in the silence. My fingers gripped the steering wheel harder, the leather creaking under the pressure. I had to follow the rules. I had to stay calm. The figure stood there for a moment, its silhouette just inches from the window, and I instinctively lowered my gaze. I remembered Rule 3, do not open the window or door. Instead, I leaned slightly toward the glass and spoke, my voice steady but betraying a slight edge of tension. I wish to proceed with my mission. There was a pause, a silence that felt too uncomfortable. Then I heard a faint, unnerving chuckle, low and dark, like it came from somewhere deep within the figure. It was as if it was mocking me. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look directly at it, even though I could feel its presence hovering beside me. The figure then retreated, slowly, its steps fading into the mist without a sound. I didn't move, not until it was completely gone, and I wasn't sure what to make of what had just happened. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. The silence around me felt unbearable now. I glanced at the tunnel entrance once more, the fog creeping in further, swallowing the road. I could feel the air thickening, pressing in on me. I wasn't sure what to expect next, but I knew I had to keep going. I shifted the car into drive and slowly eased forward, the headlights flickering momentarily as I entered the darkness of the tunnel. The sound of my tires on the wet asphalt echoed off the walls, amplifying the eerie silence. I kept my speed slow, but the further I drove, the more I felt something was wrong. There was a shift in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror once again, and this time, my heart nearly stopped. There, in the reflection, I saw it, something seated in the back of the car. Its form was still, and yet I could feel its presence as though it were breathing down my neck. I forced myself to keep my gaze on the road ahead. I felt the weight of its stare, an oppressive force, as if it was studying me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I repeated the next rule in my mind. Rule 8. As you enter the tunnel, you may see a shadow in your rearview mirror, seated in the back. Do not panic. Do not look directly at it. Simply ask, "How's the weather?" I wanted to laugh, but I glanced at the rearview mirror again, and there it was, its shadow still in the back, sitting motionless. It wasn't moving, just waiting. I could feel my pulse quicken. It was too surreal, too insane. "How's the weather?" I said, my voice tight. For a moment, there was no response. I held my breath, waiting for an answer, and then it came, slow and deliberate. "It's raining," it replied, its voice smooth and almost detached. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. The rule had said that if it replied that it was raining, I wasn't in immediate danger. I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, though. The air felt heavier, more suffocating with every passing second. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands tight on the wheel, trying to ignore the shadow in the mirror. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, and the further I went, the more I felt something pulling at me, something pressing in from all sides. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind the car, though when I checked the mirror, there was nothing, just that oppressive darkness. Then I saw it, a faint glimmer of movement ahead. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I got closer, I saw the figure again, standing in the middle of the road, just ahead of the tunnel's entrance. My heart raced, and my grip on the wheel tightened. I had no choice but to follow the rules. I had to stop. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching against the wet road as the figure slowly advanced toward my car once more. It was the same one from before, the same cloak of mist surrounding it, the same unnerving presence. It approached my door, and I kept my eyes forward, doing my best to remain calm. I knew what was coming next. Rule 11. When you meet the figure again, stop your vehicle as it approaches. This time, it will want to engage in a game. Lower your window fully. Give it your gun, make sure it is fully loaded. It will point it at you, and you must remain still. One of two things will happen. It may fire, but nothing will emerge from the barrel. If you are shot, we will send your family your uniform, provided you are found. I was shaking, but I remembered I had to hide my fear, so I forced myself to stop. I reached down and pulled the gun from its holster, feeling the cold steel in my hand. It was a comfort, but I knew it wouldn't help me now. I lowered the window fully, just as the rule had said. The figure came closer, its form now standing right outside my door. I didn't make a move. I didn't say anything. It was all I could do to keep from trembling. The air was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of its stare, though I didn't look at it directly. The figure reached out, and I felt a cold hand grip the barrel of my gun. Pulled it from my hand, pointing it directly at me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I kept my breathing steady. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the figure began to pull the trigger, but the gun didn't fire. Nothing came from the barrel, just silence. And then the figure stepped back, disappearing into the fog once again. I didn't wait. I didn't want to wait. I slammed my foot on the gas, the car surging forward, heading straight forward. The tunnel's dim light seemed to be miles away. I pushed the accelerator to the floor, the engine roaring in protest. I had to make it. I had to survive. The car rocketed forward, the engine being pushed it to its absolute limit, the speedometer climbing higher and higher. The tunnel stretched ahead, its walls closing in, the blackness consuming everything beyond the reach of my headlights. Everything felt like a dream. I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew I had to escape. The figure, the rules, everything, they all weighed on my shoulders. I kept telling myself to hold it together, to follow the rules, but the fear had already settled deep in my bones, and no matter how much I tried to calm myself, I could feel the panic bubbling up inside me. I glanced at the rearview mirror again, and for a split second, I thought I saw something, a shadow just on the edge of my vision. It was fleeting, like a flicker of movement in the dark, but it was enough to send my pulse into overdrive. I couldn't afford to look back now. I had to keep my eyes forward. I had to keep driving, but the feeling of something chasing me, something closing in, lingered, pressing in on me from all sides. I focused on the road, trying to keep the car straight, but it felt like the tunnel was never going to end. Every bend in the road seemed to stretch out longer than it should. The mist made it extremely difficult to see. My headlights barely cut through the darkness anymore, the beams scattering uselessly into the haze. The only sound was my own labored breathing, filling the car with an almost unbearable tension. The world outside was silent, as if everything had been swallowed by the void of the tunnel. Felt like hours, even though I knew it couldn't have been. I could feel the car trembling beneath me, the road uneven and bumpy. I had no idea if I was still in the tunnel or if I had somehow passed through it and into some other place entirely. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to. The rules, especially Rule 12, kept echoing in my mind. If you survive, accelerate as fast as possible toward the tunnel's exit. The vehicle must reach its maximum speed. If you are too far from the exit or fail to go fast enough, you will not make it. Should you reach the end, congratulations. You have survived. A shadow stretching across the road, too long, too thin. A figure. No, couldn't be. I didn't dare to believe it. Then I heard the unbearable sound of scraping. The unmistakable scraping noise came from the roof of my car on the outside. My stomach dropped into my feet. No, couldn't be. Not now. Not after everything. It was like a countdown, a timer ticking down to some inevitable, horrible end. Suddenly, the scraping stopped. I looked at the rearview mirror again, and this time, I saw the shadow. It was there, sitting in the back seat, its shape flickering in and out of view, like it was partially submerged in the fog. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its presence. It was real. It was here. Couldn't stop. I had to keep going. I had to follow the rules. I could feel my hands trembling on the wheel, but I forced myself to keep driving. The figure remained motionless, but I could feel its eyes on me. It was watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I knew what was coming next. The thought of losing my sanity made my head spin. I had to stay focused. I had to stay in control. Couldn't let it get to me. As I was sure I was at the point of no return, I saw it. A light, faint but unmistakable. The exit. It was there, just ahead. I pushed the car harder, the tires squealing as they fought for traction. The light ahead grew brighter, blinding, and I felt a surge of hope, of relief. I was going to make it. I was going to survive. But then, as I neared the exit, I saw the same figure from the beginning. It was standing in the light, waiting for me. I didn't stop. I slammed my foot down on the accelerator even harder since I knew I wouldn't crash due to lack of visibility. The figure stepped forward, but I didn't flinch. I didn't slow down. I drove straight through it. The car jolted as I passed through the figure, but I didn't look back. The tunnel was behind me now, and ahead was the open road. I had made it. I had survived, or so I thought.